Hi, everybody. Welcome to the new normal. I'm your host, Lisa Davis, aka Like. Take two. Um, Welcome back to the show. I am Litecoin Lisa, and you are here at the new normal. We have Dr. Reg McDaniel joining us today to talk about the benefits of Acemannan and when you have diabetes and how it might affect you taking that. So we'll be right back with Dr. Reg McDaniel right after this. Give us a like and share the video. Welcome back, Dr. McDaniel. I had a rough start there, but good to see you again.
Great to be here.
I know you're in Texas and we're all having these wild summer rains. How are you holding up down there?
Well, I can't believe we're having a monsoon season with water just standing. Our pond is full and the ducks are enjoying it.
Well, good. That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So today you were bringing us some information about diabetes and the effects of using Acemannan when you have diabetes. What can you share with us?
Well, the first thing I would say is that economists and people in nutrition have frequently said that with a rising tide, all boats float higher.
Mm-hmm.
I use this to point out that the influence of the United States has been worldwide, and that all people are living a little bit higher social order, that there's more food available than ever before for the world's population. Well, with this increase in food, one of the problems of too many calories is obesity. And with obesity, one of the real frequent problems, and it's a real challenge to the human condition, is type 2 diabetes, that excess calories ingested with more food being available, if you're not burning it in energy with your activity, it's stored as fat. And when it's stored with fat, the metabolism shifts over to diabetogenic, or too much sugar in the blood vessels. And so we might recognize that though many people criticize the United States, that a lot of this may come from jealousy of our lifestyle and power that our country has, but we have done a lot for other countries. And all of this was kind of theoretical to me, but I was the medical director for Manna Relief Ministries. And this was a companion to the dietary supplement company that I was involved with. That every order, a small amount went for charity to this Manna Relief Ministries, and we were sending dietary supplements to 81 different orphanages in countries. And most of these were in Africa. And lo and behold, we started receiving emails, and they asked, "Do you have anything for obesity in children?" I said, "Obesity in your orphanages in Africa?" I says, "My idea of these children is skinny bones and no meat on their arms and legs and swollen belly, and you're wanting something for obesity? What in the world's going on?" He said, "Well, the United States has done so much to improve the amount of production per acre in food supplies, that we have so many governments From the United Nations, UNESCO sends us food, and not profits and religious groups send us food, but they're nearly all high caloric,
Right.
and they're not balanced with fruits and vegetables and nuts and berries. It's primarily rice and corn and wheat products that have a lot of calories, and the children just aren't that active enough to burn it all, and so they put it on as fat, and so we've got destitute children that are obese, and we need something for obesity. And I happen to think of that analogy that many have used, that in fact we have done a lot for many people, and one of those is getting too much food for the amount of activity that some people are doing, is even reflected in the orphanages in Africa. But if we'll go to the first slide, I'll point out that diabetes. Do we have the first slide?
Yes, I'm sorry.
Okay. Has been around for a long time. And in the Egyptian papyrus in 1550, there's one of the first recorded evidences of high sugar content in the urines of individuals. Well, two medical students during their summer externships in 1921 found out by tying off the artery to the pancreas that in dogs that the blood sugars went up, and they gathered from this that there's something in the pancreas that's involved with the level of sugar being circulated in the blood. And it's a kind of a long, nice story, but they eventually found out there are little islets of Langerhans, it's called, in the pancreas that produce insulin that is dumped into the bloodstream coming through, and it facilitates the glucose going across the membrane into the various cells of the body. And up to this time, about the only management for any diabetic was by diet, trying to restrict their carbohydrate, which would be a source for glucose. And this was an incredible finding. And so these two medical students that didn't go to medical school to get rich wanted to make this a gift to all diabetics. And this was published in for a year or so. They were only medical school experiments with this extract from the pancreas. And in fact, in 1922, an individual 14-year-old type 1 diabetic named Leonard Thompson got the first injection of insulin to drop his peripheral glucose levels. And this was written up and published, but nothing happened to make this insulin available worldwide. Well, there was no economic incentive to make and produce and distribute insulin, but the drug company Eli Lilly developed a factory where they would get frozen pancreases from the slaughterhouses for beef and pigs. And in this facility, they would extract the insulin, and therefore they patented the process for doing this, and could protect their intellectual property for their company and their stockholders. And so now they had an incentive for profit, and they made it available extremely cheaply for all the diabetics in the world. Unfortunately, in the modern era, every company that insulin's out of patent now, that they're trying to find all kind of different ways for delivery to increase the price of insulin so there can be more profit in it. But that's kind of some of the background for diabetes, and it was primarily before insulin made in the pancreas, and that's a natural product, so insulin can't be patented, but you could patent the process to isolate it. And in fact, on a tour, I actually saw the factory where Eli Lilly still is doing this. Next slide, please. In the United States, we've got about 38 million diabetics. That's a lot of people. And there's an untold number of people that are overweight and there's some degree of obesity, and they don't even know they have diabetes or in a pre-diabetic state. So the total number of people that are faced with the challenge of diabetes is huge. Now, the World Health Organization, WHO, says this is a worldwide silent epidemic, that so many people are getting so much more food that they're getting obese, and that obesity leads to type 2 diabetes. And when you have type 2 diabetes, you have an increased incidence of deposits of fatty materials in the blood vessels, the arteries that supply the heart, and you have heart disease, and particularly heart attacks is a problem that faces an increased incidence in diabetics, and also in the blood vessels that go to the brain, increased incidence of strokes. And what more people can note is that, unfortunately, the blood vessels, the arteries going to the legs and the feet and the toes begin to stop up, just like those vessels in the heart and the neck go into the brain, and their toes turn black, or they develop ulcers that won't heal because there's not enough circulation. And so a all too common problem with diabetics is amputation of toes, their feet, their lower limbs, and even up to their knees. There's also an increased incidence of arthritis among diabetics, and this increased glucose affects the host defenses to the fact that there's increased infections in diabetics, and there's also an increase in cancer in diabetics. So the next slide, please. Uh, One of the first things that we were able to find out is that the active ingredient from aloe, which is aloe acemannan, which is a dietary supplement ingredient that now I've got 39 years of experience. And what I wanted to show you here is at the top on the right hand side here, it looks like a star that's dark and it has an E in the middle of it. Well, that's what happens to red cells trying to circulate through capillaries that are the final tiny blood vessels that are between the cells to bring in oxygen, nutrients, and take away waste products. Well, you notice this distortion of this erythrocyte because the yellow arrows point out under this electron microscope that the blood vessel is lined by very special cells called endothelial cells. And one of the reasons they're very special is that they have a charge on their surface that retards coagulation of the blood and binding to the stroma of the erythrocytes. And even though they are distorted, they go right on through because they don't stick. These endothelial cells are much like Teflon you have in the kitchen that they promote that things won't stick. And so the endothelial cells, which we show there you can see the nucleus, and then it has cytoplasm that goes around so that the inside of this vessel and down below it, you have a drawing to point out that there's this thin layer of endothelial cells that line capillaries, and that the broader red pink there, it's smooth muscles. And so you see the red arrow going to the smooth muscle on the outside of the blood vessel. And it's influenced primarily by the nervous system, because if you get embarrassed or cold, oftentimes your skin will either turn white or very red. And if it dilates these smooth muscles, it gets red, or you sweat, or you let off heat, or if it's cold and they contract, you have more of a white face or white skin, because the blood vessels are constricted by these smooth muscles. Well, the reason I'm showing this is because the high glucose is very toxic to the endothelial cells, that are very special cells that line the capillaries, that, like we were talking about, going to the heart, to the brain, to the toes. And I might add that these capillaries also go to the retina in the eye. And one of the complications of diabetes is poor vision, and actually can progress to blindness caused by diabetes. But I wanted to show you the type of cells in electron microscopy, and also in a drawing, that are very toxic due to the high glucose, and that this vessel can be dilated by the smooth muscles, or constricted. But whatever goes on, that the charge on these endothelial cells allow the blood to flow through without coagulating and without trapping the red cells, which are also called erythrocytes. So let's go to the next slide. Now, one of the things that has puzzled me is, why are these endothelial cells so sensitive to glucose? What happens? Well, the biochemistry is kind of complex, but I think from a lay standpoint, a good thing I can tell you is that you can see ads to the effect that maybe your legs or abdomen, or if you want to wear a very minor amount of material bathing suit, they call them spider veins. They're bluish and they stick out, and they're not attractive. So there are companies that advertise that they can get rid of these spider veins. Well, how do they do it? And these are distended little venules, like we just show with electron microscopy. Well, they take a very fine needle and they probe down and they stick it in one of these little spider veins, and can draw back on the hub and get a little bit of blood. But inside that syringe, they have high concentrated glucose. And when they draw that blood back, then they force that, almost like honey, thick, high concentration glucose into that blood vessel. And then they put pressure on it to pressure bandage. Well, what happens there? Well, the endothelial cells are so sensitive to this glucose that it's much like when you get sunburn and you've got denuded skin, and you have a weeping skin there that's all red and fluid on it, or either maybe a heat blister, or maybe you've been bitten by or squashed a blister bug, but you have this weeping skin. Well, the inside of these blood vessels, these endothelial cells are destroyed. It's toxic to them, and by pressure, that fibroblasts grow into it, and it obliterates the little venule, and that's the way they get rid of spider veins. Well, in the biochemistry of just why all this denuding of the inside of the blood vessel, so that you can compress it and it will fibrose together and obliterate it, is that the high glucose causes the mitochondria in the endothelial cells to overproduce the free radical scavenging molecules, if you recall from previous lectures, that every cell has mitochondria in it, and that the mitochondria reverse the process of photosynthesis, where a little bit of energy from the sun is trapped in carbon to carbon molecules in a chain that come from CO2 that we breathe out and from fermentation. And That the mitochondria break that bond between carbon atoms, and it releases oxygen molecules. Instead of O2, it's O1 and other uh, ions that can attach to. Frequently, I have in my hand these bar magnets to show you, and I don't know where it is right now. Well, here it is. That the mitochondria produce a molecule that attaches to these free radicals, and it inactivates them, and so they don't attach to the membranes in the cell, and particularly they don't attach to the DNA in the cell or the nucleic acids, which is very uh, potentially destructive, because the order in which molecules are in the chains of your DNA is stored information. And if you generate by the mitochondrial activity free radicals, and it attaches like the magnet attraction here to a nucleic acid, it changes the information in the gene, and that's called a mutation. And the worst mutations are cancer. So that's how high glucose in the vessels of diabetes can lead to cancers, because these mitochondria in the endothelial cells overproduce the ion that's supposed to attach to free radicals, and this is toxic. Also, the cells make RNA that does not come from DNA, and that's not good. And the there is a sodium and glucose transporting molecule that are called inhibitors that induce endothelial dysfunction. So endothelial cells metabolize glucose just like other cells, but when there's too much glucose, these bad things happen that we listed above. And this dysfunction not only affects the blood vessels in the toes and in the legs, but also in the retina. And another real important one is the capillaries in the glomeruli of your kidneys that can lead to kidney failure. And that's one of the principal types of patients that are in renal dialysis centers, are diabetics, that the high glucose has affected the vessels inside the kidneys, like we were talking about just a moment ago about overproduction of the mitochondria free radical scavengers. And we mentioned it was the heart and the blood vessels, and that leads to amputations. And all of this also affects the bone marrow and lymph nodes, which is the reason that diabetics have an increased
And
chronic
cancers
infections.
and possible cancers, right?
Yes, because of too much ions floating around attaching to the DNA that alters the instructions that are in DNA. Let's
DNA. I
wow.
also I also heard recently, and I don't know if this makes sense to you or can confirm this, that it was like the sugar or the sucrose or glucose in your blood is diabetes, in your something is cancer, in your brain, sugar in your brain is Alzheimer's. Does that kind of follow that narrative? with what you're talking about?
Well, the dysfunction that comes from the damage to the capillaries to all organs includes the brain, which is in its function is cognition and memory. And so you're going to have alterations in that function, and that alteration we call dementia. And there are at least two types of dementia. One of them is due to the blood vessels stopping up, and to the type of things that comes from high glucose. And also there's certain families have genes that have a propensity that everybody in the family gets Alzheimer's. So
Okay.
this is erroneous information coded in the DNA in the families that tend to have Alzheimer's. And then there's the metabolic damage that you're talking about of the too high glucose and the mechanisms that we have there of the altered biochemistry that I tried to simplify by saying that inside the blood vessels, these endothelial cells get denuded just like an open ulcer or blister, and by pressure on it, you can obliterate those blood vessels. So that's a oversimplification of that diabetes we were talking about. Let's have the next slide.
Okay.
Now, getting down to hard facts, in 2021, which is one of the last years that they have that we have heart attacks, that 375,000 died of heart attacks, which are increased by diabetes. And the data for 2022, 162,890 died of strokes. And so the number of diagnosed diabetics in the United States is about 30 million. They got 29.7. And this is a terrible amount. And then we got the undiagnosed diabetics, which they estimate is about 8.7 people, or that the total of this would be about 22 or about 23% of the population are diabetic. And this comes from the Center for Disease Control. And so what we're talking about is very significant. That's a reason I'm including it in this series. And I pointed out that the World Health Organization say due to the increased amount of food available worldwide promotes obesity, and obesity promotes diabetes. And if we don't have the worldwide statistics, but it must be astronomical. Next slide, please. Now, you say, what are the symptoms of diabetics? And one of the first things is that people are always thirsty, because to get rid of the excess sugar, the kidneys work overtime, and you have polyuria, urinating more frequently, and also always thirsty and have a dry mouth. So the body is trying to get rid of that glucose out through the urine, and so you want more water because you're having excess diuresis and going to urinate too often. And this people have chronic fatigue, blurred vision. All of a sudden, despite there have been no other changes, they have weight loss. And they frequently, because of this damage to the capillaries, they have numbness and tingling of the hands and feet. And there's slow healing of defects in the skin. And one of the real problems of well-established diabetes is that abscesses and on the legs particularly that just will not heal. And fortunately, with addition to their diet of the nutrients that are in New Eden, we have been able time and time again to help these diabetics heal these lesions that they were going to either whack off by surgery a bunch of tissue in hopes of getting higher where there's still good capillary perfusion. And I, I mentioned that the immune system, the lymph nodes, and the bone marrow are damaged, and therefore the host defense is reduced. And one of the most common things are Manila or yeast infections. In fact, is if you go into a doctor's office, male or female, and you've got some kind of yeast infection that they can see under the microscope or with cultures, they will frequently do a blood sugar or a test to give a loading dose of glucose in a container and serially draw your blood to see how high the level goes and how it comes back down as it's supposed to, because Manila is a signal to many physicians that you ought to look for diabetes. Next slide, please. Uh, to get the diagnosis of diabetes, you can take blood sugars, and the AM blood sugars, and this gets to be controversial because there are different sources of saying how strict they are of saying pre-diabetic or diabetes has been established, but the morning awakening after all night, generally the blood sugars are around 90 to 110. And sometimes they say that a good average is about 99 milligrams per millimeter of blood. And that if you have a meal or you're given a dose of glucose to measure that at 2 hours, it'll generally go up to about 140, and if it goes higher than about 140, you get, and particularly if it goes down slowly, indicating that there's not enough insulin to bring it down like it should be, back down to the 90 to 110, that this is indicating of diabetes. Now, there's a more common test now that is coming to be. It's called hemoglobin A1C, or glycosylated hemoglobin study. And this is worth understanding because more and more, to try to determine if a person is diabetic, they will draw the blood and it will assay it for hemoglobin A1C. And what is this? Well, your red cells have protein stroma that gives them their shape. And as they circulate around, if the blood sugar goes up high, it binds to the stroma of the red cells. And the red cells become a sort of a onboard monitoring device or a surrogate marker to give you an indicator of what kind of damage is being done in the capillaries to the kidneys and to the eye and to the heart and to the brain, because the more hours you have elevated glucose, the more binding you have of the glucose to the stroma of the red cells. So you can tell what's been happening over the last month to 6 weeks in terms of are you having more hours of high glucose. And they even have a dispute over what level human A1C that you would diagnose as absolute diabetes. And so I went to the American Diabetic Association standards for consensus for the range of glucose. And for a non-pregnant adult, either a type 1 or a type 2 diabetic, the association says that less 70% of the day, or around 17 hours, you should be no lower than 70 and no higher anytime 180 milligrams. Well, most people say 180 is too high and 70 is too low, as I was telling you about. Many people say around 90 to 110, but those are the extreme limits. And the society says the hemoglobin A1C is approximately 7%. Anything higher than that, you're diabetics. Well, you will find that many people say that our sources that are experts in metabolism say that your fasting blood sugars we've been using between 90 to 110 to 130, that the hemoglobin A1C should be 5.7% binding of the glucose to the red cell stroma. So there is such a wide range of seriousness of diabetes that different groups that are specialists in this area have different areas amounts that they are willing to make the diagnosis. So I would say that more physicians use fasting glucose of 90 to 130 and hemoglobin A1C of about 5.7 or less than the higher values that the Diabetic Association allows before they make the diagnosis. So what they're saying is that the Diabetic Association is giving you more leeway, and that the average trained doctor that is a little more strict, and well, significantly more strict. But I'm pointing out that everybody has different genes. Even diabetics have different genes. And everybody has different diets, and everybody has different amounts of exercise and activity to burn the glucose. And this influences these values because you get energy from the glucose when it's processed by the mitochondria to make adenosine triphosphate, which is the energy molecule of the body. So next slide, please. It doesn't matter whether it's type 1 or type 2 diabetes. There's the major difference is that type 1 diabetes used to be called youth onset, and it's definitely insulin dependent. These type 1s just don't make enough insulin. And there are research projects that suggest that there are Coxsackie viruses that have a predilection for the insulin producing cells in the pancreas, and that causes type 1 diabetes. And that's why you have young people in different institutions or different areas, kind of a cluster that they seem to think it's this infectious Coxsackie virus has a predilection to attack those diabetic insulin producing cells. Well, type 2 diabetics basis, they frequently have a lot of insulin. They even make more insulin, but they tend to be obese, and it's insulin resistance. The insulin just doesn't work. And you will find more like 10 to 20 type 2 diabetics for every type 1 diabetic you find in the population. But the real significant thing is at one time only diet was used to try to manage the diabetes, and diet is still essential in diabetic control. And with combined with exercise, there's synergism. So you need, in particularly type 2 diabetes, weight management, and try to reduce your fat mass, because the body's trying to service, shall we say, these extra fat cells on the abdomen and in the insulin fat storage of your body. And that one of the real common things is you want to reduce the carbohydrates in the diet and increase fruits, vegetables, nuts, berries. And it's controversial, but it's believed to be low animal meat and fats, and particularly avoid processed meat. And that in the management of type 2 diabetes, obesity, exercise is essential. Uh, and we have had incredible benefits with the fact that in the New Eden dietary supplements that I have 39 years experience with, is that the fresh fruits and vegetables that are available in the market. When 1940s, when I was a youth, nearly all the grocery stores were owned by a local family, and there were many fruits and vegetables you could only have about 4 to 6 weeks because very few things were sold further than 50 miles from this family-owned grocery store. Well, what has happened is now we have national market chains and agribusiness, and lo and behold, you can go down and you can have watermelon, all your different melons, berries, blackberries, uh, blueberries, strawberries, grapes, year round. How do they do this? Well, they've got to have a shipping life and a shelf life, so they harvest when they're green to, because if they're ripen on the plant, they'll be rotten by the time they get to the market. So they pick them green, and this is before the genes in the plant can put the nutrients that our genes call for in cellular synthesis to make bioactive molecules for optimal health. Well, fortunately, technology has changed that these fruits that are vine or tree ripened can be rushed to the freeze dryer and formed into a powder. And in these plant matured things that you can't ship, now you can put in a dietary supplement, and you're restoring with dietary supplement what used to be in the family diet when more and more people had family gardens and orchards. So that's people will say why taking dietary supplements, it's a miracle, the benefits I've gotten. Well, it's not a miracle. It's taking advantage of plant matured fruits and vegetables that the genes in the plant put the molecules in there that in the human DNA calls for in cellular synthesis to make the bioactive molecules that manage good health. So, and I add there that insulin first came out very cheap, but now companies are trying all different types of formulations to last longer, to be less painful to take it, and increasing the price for something that was originally to be a gift to all diabetics from these two medical students. Next slide, please. Now, uh, we have gone over the mechanisms that obesity leads to diabetics, and I'm going to show you a paper here that is from Korea, and its title is Molecular Mechanisms of Anti-Obesity and Anti-Diabetic Properties in Flavonoids. And flavonoids are a molecule made in plants. This gives you the where you can find the scientific article, and it has 10 additional uh, authors to this paper. And flavonoids are a plant molecule that have 15 carbons in a chain with some rings that are made up of these carbons, two phenol rings and a heterocyclic ring, and I'll show you the shape of. And there's over 5,000 types of flavones in plants. And I particularly chose this because it's incredible the number of different plant-made molecules that the genes in every one of us call for to be able to properly synthesize the bioactive compounds that run the biochemistry and physiology of life. And so flavones just give you a hint to the broad range of different types of molecules in the plants that our DNA calls for. Now, the next slide shows you the structure, general structure in the center of what a flavonoid made in plants can be modified in different ways to make flavonols, flavones, and isoflavones. That's how you get to 5,000 molecules, but each one of these can be utilized in small amounts to complete the proper synthesis of bioactive molecules that optimize health. And I only show you this because there's worldwide research trying to find more and more kinds of plants that you can include in the diet, which are much more economical than prescription drugs. And it's working and supporting the engineering and design of life that is coded in the DNA of our genes that control the synthesis or the assembly of adding together nutrient molecules that function to run the biochemistry and the physiology of life. And I just like to end with the fact that our population worldwide, and I was indoctrinated as much as anyone by the pharmaceutical industry, that if you got a complaint that's physical, mental, or emotional, we got a drug for it. And they don't tell you to ignore the side effects and toxicities or the price of it, because if they're in patent, they're very expensive. But here in nutrition, and the National Geographic Society has issued a series of grants to an individual named Dan Brutner, Bruettner, and he has gone on this research grant and found different sites that they call blue zones where individuals live longer years of good life, up to the 90 and 100 years, and in good health. And the common denominator of all these blue zones that they have found is diet, a broad diet, and you combine that with activity. And in these blue zones, most of them are isolated islands or peninsulas where electricity and modern conveniences are not present. If you go anywhere, you walk or drive a bicycle, and you get, or you're herding sheep or goats or cows, much like years ago, that you've got a diet. Nearly all the blue zones, the individuals have a personal garden and orchard, and they only eat fruits and vegetables that are plant matured. And all of these things work to decrease obesity, decrease diabetes, and in fact, good nutrition is a disruptive technology to the drug paradigm, which I say is the toxic and expensive alternative to supporting the engineering and design of life as is coded in DNA in all our cells, whereas the drugs poison the engineering and design of life to suppress symptoms. And the ideal drug is if you quit taking it, the symptoms come back, whereas nutrition corrects the cause for symptoms. And I hope this gives you an insight into your dietary management. Fact is, they point out in the Blue Zone books, there are 5 books out now that National Geographic has published about the Blue Zones, and they have a Netflix series that you can get on your TV. And National Geographic even has a channel, and they have put issues of their journal, which goes to every library known on earth, about the benefits of a plant based diet and exercise to reduce obesity and diabetes and all the complications that we've gone through today of how high glucose is toxic to the little cells called endothelial cells that line all the capillaries that go to all the organs in our body. If you have any questions, you've got my email there. I particularly recently received a manuscript from China, paid for by the government of China, that starts out by recognizing the research that I was a part of the team of in the 1980s and 90s. They cite our key papers, and then in their bibliography, they add about 100 additional papers published since 2000 that validate in an independent manner the value of the nutrients that are in the New Eden that is built around the active molecule in Acemannan, which is the research. I was a consultant starting back in 1985, 39 years ago, which you can have benefits. And the major benefit that it came just sitting here, I realized that since 1994, when the dietary supplement industry was started by federal legislation, that we have been seeing 75 to 80% of the blue zone benefits just by adding the active ingredient from the aloe plant to the diet to get these molecules that are only present in food that you eat that is vine ripened. And so if you would like a copy of that paper, you've got my email that I gave you there, RMAC Daniel Wellness Quest, if you're interested in this paper from China. I also have a paper from England where the two societies are urging the National Health Service to turn to nutrition as an economical way to support the engineering and design of life rather than using expensive toxic drugs. And all of this helps to reduce diabetes, which is a worldwide challenge. Thank you.
Wonderful. I really appreciate you giving us all that information. I want to just point everybody to the links in the description of this video to make sure they go to wellnessquest.org and get what we recommend is you sign up for a monthly subscription. You'll get a discount. And right now you get a free probiotic with your monthly subscription of New Eden. It's $100 a month. And you once again receive the free probiotic. And you will get your aloe, and it has all your other great nutrients in it. You can go to wellnessquest.org and reach out and also get Dr. McDaniel's book, A Primal Provision. And there are many other great products on there. So check that out. They will also ask you how you found Wellness Quest. So make sure you tell them that Lisa sent you. And you can also email Dr. Reg at the email address on the screen below with any questions. He loves sharing knowledge with you and in those research papers. So please reach out to him for any other information. Thanks again, Dr. Reg. We appreciate it. You always bring such great information.
Thank you, and have a wonderful day.
Awesome. Thanks so much. All right, you guys, please share this video to get more information out there. Everybody be healthy and well, and we will see you guys next time here on The New Normal. Take care.